And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Got a little bit of an earlier episode for you guys today if you were watching along on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres or over on Twitter at mtorres sports. Also on the Ducks Digest Facebook page. We are doing our Oregon football slash recruiting mailbag episode. Trying to do these every single week. Make sure you guys are part of the show. A lot of times I do these pre-recorded episodes that drop in the morning, but kind of nice to send us into the weekend with a little bit of a live show and a mailbag to get to see what you guys have to say about Oregon football. So with all of that being said, let's hop right into the mailbag, or as they say on the Cover 3 podcast, another podcast I like to listen to. Open up the big old bag of mail. If you guys are here in the live chat, go ahead and ask me a question in the live chat. It can be football related or recruiting related. Going to be going. It looks like my goal is for about 30 minutes today, a little bit of a shorter episode, but nonetheless, wanted to get on here and get you guys some more duck talk because I know that that's what you're here for. So yeah, if you guys have a question, definitely go ahead and throw it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it. The first question of today's mailbag episode comes from Kayla or Kala 84745. Question is, how do you see this 24 class finishing? As you said, are missing out on some players, though it hurts, won't be a consistent trend. Who ends up being a Duck? So this is a really interesting question, kind of projecting the finish of this class. Gives me a little bit of an idea for a story. But I think I see Oregon's class finishing inside the top 10. I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation or an unrealistic goal for the Ducks on the recruiting trail under the Dan Lanning this cycle. They're at number 12 right now, according to 247 Sports, and they're still in the running for a lot of blue chip elite talent on the recruiting trail. And like you said, kind of in the question, missing out on some of these guys, some of these top targets definitely hurts, but we're only in August. So just because you miss out now in August or maybe even earlier in the summer months doesn't mean that they're ultimately not going to end up at Oregon. The Ducks are definitely working to try and flip a couple of guys. I talked about some of those recruits on a recent episode of the pod and certainly on a story over on Ducks Digest. Not all of them are likely flip candidates, but I talked about guys like Justin Williams, talented linebacker out of Georgia, Nate Frazier, out of Texas, committed to Georgia. Nate Frazier is one of the best all-purpose backs in the country, also committed to Georgia out of Modern Day. Then you have Elijah Rushing, the edge rusher out of Arizona. I think Oregon's still staying involved there and going to do with that whatever they can to try to flip him, but that's going to be a tough one as well. You also have Jeremiah McClellan, who's a really, really good wide receiver, committed to Ohio State. I think maybe some of the possibility or some of the hope there is that Brian Hartline might head to the NFL, and that could maybe be an opening for the Ducks to get back into that recruitment. Maybe they get him on campus. Remember, with Jeremiah McClellan, the Ducks were trying to get him on campus for Saturday Night Live in late July, but that one ultimately didn't end up happening. So because that trip didn't happen, I know that the Ducks would love to try to get him back on campus here in the 24 cycle. And of other guys that come to mind. Those are the main ones that come to mind right now. They just came off the flip of Dakota Fields from USC, so they definitely have some good news there. But as far as who ends up being a Duck, I think the Ducks are still in a really good spot with Sione Laulea, the number one junior college prospect in the country this cycle. He's working from a top three of Oregon, USC, and Miami. And I think that Oregon is a huge player in that recruitment after getting him out on campus for his official visit back in June. 6'4", 6'3". Cornerbacks are not very easy to find, and he's got some great speed as well. So I think he's a guy who remains at the top of Oregon's board in terms of corners that they're still looking for. Probably the top corner, I would think, because they don't really have that great of a shot in my eyes for Kobe Black, a 5-star corner in the 24 class out of Texas. He looks like he's turning into Steve Sarkisian and the Longhorns. As far as other players that could end up being a Duck, I'm not putting my predictions in on this show right now, but guys that I think Oregon definitely has a shot at. Got to look at Jason Brown Jr., 2024 running back out of Washington. I wrote a recent story over on Ducks Digest, Prospect Pulse, where I kind of weigh in and give my thoughts on where Oregon stands with a recruit, and I think Oregon has a great chance to land Jason Brown Jr. It might be time for me to put in a prediction for him, but not jumping the gun just yet. You got Oregon, Michigan State, and Washington all in the running there. I think Oregon has a commanding lead right now with Michigan State running in second, and then you also have Washington at number 3. But Washington is just they haven't done a good job recruiting in-state talent. Certainly crazy to me how they haven't done a better job recruiting Jason Brown, seeing that he's right in their backyard. But that's fine for Oregon. They're totally cool with taking some of these top players out of the state of Washington away from the Huskies. You also have Braden Platt, who picked up 2 new crystal ball predictions in favor of Oregon on Thursday, and they were pretty notable ones. They came from Brandon Huffman, who is based out of Washington, kind of that Seattle area. So that he has a really good pulse on recruitments out there, and just in general. So you have Braden Huffman and Steve Wiltfong both put in predictions for Braden Platt to go to Oregon. I think that's definitely a great shot for the Ducks there. I put my prediction in last month, but I think that Oregon's definitely in a good spot there for Braden Platt to kind of round out their linebacker core. You lose out on a guy like Justin Williams, and that's definitely a tough sting, seeing that it was down to Oregon and Georgia. But there's really not too much you can say to try to get a guy to go to Oregon over Georgia. It's just really tough. We've talked about that on the show before, but I like where they stand for Braden Platt. Also have Aiden Breland, a 5-star defensive lineman. I think he's another guy that Oregon is really, really heavily in the mix for. He's kind of buttoned up when it comes to interviews, doesn't want to share a whole lot, but he loves Tony Tuioti, Dan Lanning, and Tosh Lupoi. Has been to Oregon a bunch of times, so certainly has the familiarity and the visits going there. But I think that he's another guy that Oregon could very well end up finishing with. But I think there's still a bit to go in that recruitment. So that was a great first question. I hope I did a good job answering it. How do we see it finishing? Yeah, top 10. Those are some of the guys that I think could hop in the fold. Feel good about Platt. Feel good about Brown. And you also have some offensive linemen that you're still looking to fill out for. But that's another question later in the show. So we'll go ahead and table that one for later. Got another question from the mailbag. This is coming from Twitter. I always put out a call for questions on Twitter. So just so you guys know, I always prioritize that at Torres Sports, where you can find those tweets to ask your question there. But I'll see if I can get to some of these in the live chat, because I see that we have some of those as well. But the next question comes from Matt Hardy. Matt asks, who do you see as making the biggest impact of the incoming freshmen on offense and defense? Really good timing with this question, because I just posted a story over on Ducks Digest where I ranked the true freshmen that have the best chance to play for Oregon in 2023. So we'll choose one from each side of the ball here for this question. I think one of the ones that jumps off the page, probably the fastest, is true freshman defensive end, edge rusher, outside linebacker, however you want to categorize them. It's kind of all the same thing in Oregon's scheme as far as edge and outside linebackers. But Mateo is listed as a defensive end. Teo Mateo, I think, has the best chance to make the biggest impact for Oregon on defense as a true freshman. He comes out of the Southern California area, Bellflower, California, St. John Bosco, defending national champions. Got to cover Mateo quite a bit in high school. Even played a game inside Autzen Stadium during his senior year last year for the Braves, and I got to go to that game and then covered the Eastern Washington game the next day. But Mateo is really, really special. I think we already knew that when he was in high school, but I think it's just becoming that much more evident this time around in college. Why is that? What makes him special? Well, for starters, he really jumps out from a physical standpoint. You don't see a whole lot of true freshmen defensive linemen, edge rushers at 6'5", 270 pounds. So he certainly looks the part from a physical standpoint, which is kind of that first box that you need to check. Can your body take the wear and tear of the college level? And then you also just have to look at the kind of athlete that he is. Mateo played both sides of the ball throughout most of his high school career, and then he kind of focused more so on defense as a senior. But I remember watching that Southern Section CIF game against Mater Dei, and Mateo made some really big plays as a tight end, and he even took some snaps as a tight end in spring ball. So he's a guy who has some possible two-way potential. Some of the people that I've talked to that are close to the program tell me that he may even be an NFL caliber tight end. Like he's just that talented and has just that much potential. But right now, Drew Maringer says it looks like he's going to be focusing on defense, complicated scheme. But fortunately for him, I've talked to a lot of Bosco recruits, and they've told me that there's some good overlap and similarities between the St. John Bosco defense and the Oregon defense. So I think that lends itself to Mateo probably grasping, understanding the playbook a little bit faster than maybe your typical true freshman would. But this is a guy who has, like I said, crazy athleticism. Just being able to move the way he does, being able to bend the way he does is part of what's generating so much noise here in that final week of fall camp for the Ducks. So um, he's a guy who was really well coached at the high school level, and then now he's getting even better coaching from the Ducks here. And there's a big need for edge rushers at Oregon right now. Jordan Birch is a guy I talked about on yesterday's episode as one of the people that has one of the players that has the most to prove for Oregon here in the 2023 season. So that if Jordan Birch and Uiagalelei can both, really pop off this year, I think that's going to be a great situation for Oregon. That said, even though Mateo is generating all this hype, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't start right out of the gate because you just kind of want to ease him into it, and I don't think they need to start him. You have Jordan Birch, who comes in from the portal. He's a pretty obvious starter at 6'6", 6'5", 290. And then you have Mace Funa, who's a returning veteran that's played some good football for you if you're this Oregon coaching staff. So there's not that pressure to start him right away. There's not that need to start him right away. But that said, Oregon hasn't had a defender with this much hype and maybe this much promise since on Thibodeau back in the 2019 season, and he didn't even play a whole lot of ball right away. But that said, I think that Mateo is just really developed as far as his technique goes. His skill set, we've heard from coaches, we've heard from players about how varied his pass rushing skill set is, has a lot of moves that you don't typically see a true freshman be able to kind of deploy at an early age, early stage. So I think Mateo Uiagalelei is definitely the guy I'm going to go with on defense. But go give that story a read to hear about some people that aren't Mateo, because it might be a little bit more. That's a little bit more of an obvious pick. But as for offense, I'm going to go with wide receiver Jirion Davis. He's far and away the guy that's being talked about the most among the freshman wide receivers, and really just a freshman on offense. Iapani Laulaulu, the offensive lineman, is another guy who's been generating some buzz as well, but I don't think he's going to need to play given all the experience and production that the Ducks have ahead of him. So let's talk about Jirion Davis. Again, we can just start with how developed he is physically. He's listed on the Oregon roster at 6'2", 215 pounds. So he's a guy that I've gotten to see a couple of times during his high school career, and he definitely has a commanding physical presence. He's a really good route runner. I think that's probably a little bit of an underrated aspect of the game because when you have a guy who's as athletic, as physical as Jirion is, you kind of just tend to focus on how does he do, and these these one-on-one matchups where you just kind of the jump ball situations when you need a guy to just high point the ball. I think that he's obviously really, really good at that, and he just muscles the ball away from a lot of defensive backs. Granted, now he's going to be going against college defensive backs, but I think that he is a guy, and he's someone that I think can definitely make an impact for the Ducks in this wide receiver room, even though it might be the deepest wide receiver room we've seen in Eugene in quite some time. That's a room that also has Gary Bryant, Troy Franklin, Trayshawn Holden, Kyler Casper. But what makes Jirion special, I think, is what he's able to do with the ball in his hands after the catch. This is a playmaking wide receiver if you've ever seen one. And he's also a guy who returned kicks at the high school level. So that just shows you that his coaches just want to get him on the field and want to touch the ball as much as possible. So similar to what we saw with Mateo and kind of what I was saying along those lines, I don't think that Jurion maybe has as clear of a path to early playing time as Mateo does. But part of that is just because of the lack slash uncertainty of the depth at edge rusher. You have Jordan Birch and Mace Funa. And then you also have Mateo and Tatum Tuioti. Blake Purchase is another guy that we're hearing about in fall camp a little bit. But as for that receiver room, I think it's a lot more stacked, and you have a lot more experienced guys that you can probably turn to for early playing time. But definitely give me Jurion Dickey as the offensive freshman that can make the biggest impact for Oregon here in 2023. We're rolling. Next question in today's episode of the Mailbag. We're coming to you live on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. If you guys are here, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Maybe even hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any uploads. I got podcasts, I got press conferences, I got posts and pictures. So do me a huge favor and like the video and subscribe to the channel. Definitely helps support and definitely helps the algorithm. So don't want to ask that too many times, but love the support that seeing from you guys. Next question from Oregon Updates. Do you think the Ducks 2025 class will be better than the 2024 class? I think that they're certainly off to a really hot start, right? Oregon's 2025 class already has a number of really, really high profile commits. The headliner of the bunch is Dallas Wilson, who I'm told is going to be a 5-star by the time this cycle is over. He's ranked number 24 nationally, 6'3" wideout out of Tampa, Florida. The Ducks only have 4 commits, but that's good enough to earn them the number 4 class in the country, according to 247 Sports. And you also have Achilles Smith Jr. at quarterback out of San Diego. Adrian Wilson, a super crafty and explosive wide receiver that the Ducks flew from TCU. And then Chavez Sandman Thompson, an interior offensive lineman of the state of Florida. So they're off to a really good start. I think that I'll tell you this, I think that there's a chance that it can be better just because of the early momentum that they have on the recruiting trail with this class. I've talked about it in previous cycles and with other coaches. I think one of the separators between those good recruiting programs and those great recruiting programs is who can juggle the current recruiting cycle while also looking ahead to the next recruiting cycle and generating some momentum there. And they have it early, so it's only going to make it easier, I think, to parlay that momentum with some of these other recruits. They have some really, really good wide receivers, like I mentioned. I think that's super important. And they already have their quarterback squared away. But we have to see if they only want one quarterback. But either way, having that guy and those guys to build around early, I think gives you a chance to possibly exceed what you're going to do in 2024. But right now, I feel like it's a little bit too close to call as far as if Oregon's 2025 class is going to be better than the 2024 class. Sure, it could be, but we just don't know how this 24 class is going to finish because it's already pretty full. You already have 22 verbal commitments, and the guys that you're still in the running for are pretty elite guys, pretty top tier guys. You're going to be selective there. So I think that that's going to help you, from a ranking standpoint, finish with a pretty decent haul. So I think it's subjective, right? Do you want the high rankings, or are you looking at this from a who's going to have an on-field impact, who's going to be able to see the field early? I think that's another marker that you have to look at here when you're kind of evaluating a class. How many of those guys can you get on the field early and can really just make a name for themselves from the jump? All right, next question. Today we have this might be a joke, but I can answer it anyway. Jessica Lee says, Max answering, will we land any five-star players this cycle for the 100th time? Yeah, this is a question that gets asked about quite a bit in terms of just uh, five stars that Oregon can possibly land. I'm not making any predictions on them right now, but as far as the five stars that Oregon has the best chance to land that are still on the board, uncommitted, you're looking at Aiden Breland, defensive lineman, elite guy. He landed on Andrew Ivan's 50 freakiest recruits list in high school football. So go give that one a read if you haven't already. But he's a special guy. You don't really see that many kind of just freakish, dominant defensive linemen in that 6'5", 6'6", 290, 300-pound range in high school on the West Coast. That is. So he's an absolute priority. Ducks are going against Georgia, Texas A&M, Miami, and the like in that recruitment. You also have Brandon Baker, his five-star teammate, who plays on the other side of the ball at offensive tackle. I think Oregon still has a good chance there, but you're seeing a really strong and legitimate push from Texas for Brandon Baker as well as Nebraska. He's going to be an official visit out to Lincoln next month in September. Ohio State is also remaining involved. We even have Tennessee. But fortunately for the he still has a daily contact with Elite Carey. He's done a really good job developing that relationship, and Dan Lanning has done a good job as well from a head coaching perspective, just being personally involved in that recruitment. I think those are the two five stars that you have the best chance with right now. Maybe you try to flip Elijah Rushing away from the Wildcats, but that's not going to be easy. Granted, there's still quite a bit of time there. I'm just trying to see what other five stars they have here. I feel like Williams Winery is going to be hard to put from Missouri, seeing that state guy. Oregon was in the running at one point for Colin Simmons, but now he's committed to Texas. Justin Williams we talked about already, so don't need to hit on him again. But yeah, Brandon Baker and Kobe Black as well, a five-star corner from Waco, Texas. He looks like he's turning towards the Longhorns. So yeah, it's really Breland, I think. Breland, Baker, Rushing. Those are the guys that you have the best chance with in my mind. So a little bit of five-star talk, but had to name them. Got another question. We're almost through the mailbag on Twitter. 4 spots left. Question from Howard Ehrlich. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right, but Howard's question: 4 spots left. Name them. So let's see. If we're just operating on Oregon can only take 4 more commits this cycle. I think that Braden Platt at linebacker is probably your most obvious one. You get him in the fold and you round out that linebacker core. I think Jason Brown Jr. is another one just because it's looking like, in my eyes, Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington are probably going to go to the NFL next year. So then that way you can bring in Dejon Riggs and Jason Brown Jr. to join the likes of Jordan James, Dante Dowdell, and Jaden Lamar here in the 20. They came in the 23 class. So I think that's 2. If you're just operating on 4 spots, but you got Braden Platt and Jason Brown Jr. I think you need another offensive lineman. That's kind of what they're looking for. And guys like Eddie Pierce, an interior offensive lineman, also out of the Tampa, Florida area. They're also in the mix for Jordan Seaton out of IMG Academy, formerly at Washington, D.C., St. John's, where the Ducks found Dejon Riggs. So a little bit of familiarity there from a school standpoint. Maybe you don't need an offensive lineman because I think that Devin Brooks has some center ability in his game as an interior guy. So maybe Oregon could just be done at offensive line. I don't think it's a super pressing need. If it really came down to just taking 4 guys, you want to try to get Baker. But like I said, I think he might be trending away from Oregon for the first time in his recruitment. From what I've been able to get a judge on, a handle on. And you also have Sione Laulea, who is just he's a unicorn at that cornerback spot. You just don't find a lot of 6'4" corners, and I think that he's a guy that Oregon is going to stay heavily involved with until he makes his decision. And then other than that, I think you're looking at defensive line with Aiden Breland, who I already mentioned, and Jericho Johnson also has Oregon in his final schools. He comes out of California, Armijo High School in Northern California. He has Oregon, Washington, USC, and Utah as his finalists. So I think it's a pretty small pool of guys that we're working with now on the 24 and the 2024 class. People you have to keep an eye out for. So I think that was more than 4 spots, so maybe more than 4 players. But those, for my money, I think those are the guys that Oregon has the best chance with. I think they're also involved with Roger Saliapaga, who is a 2024 wide receiver, tight end guy out of Orem High School in Utah. He's kind of slow playing his recruitment, but he's listed on 247 as 6'4", 195 pounds. So I think the Ducks are also trying to get another receiver in this class. So that's another one you have to keep an eye out for. But that's a really good story idea, just kind of focusing on how many spots Oregon has left and who are some of those primary guys, those premier guys that they could be going for. I might be missing a couple, but those are the best ones that come to mind for me. Last one on Twitter. This one from Unique Syntax. Question is, do you wear duck gear when you go to high school games to watch/interview recruits, or do you prefer to stay neutral with regular clothing? Yeah, this is an interesting question because I think I tell a lot of coaches or parents what I do, and then they'll say, "Oh, so you recruit for Oregon?" And I'll say, "No, I don't recruit for Oregon, but I cover Oregon on the recruiting trail. I want to go see those players, interview those guys, cover those guys, those top recruits that are considering Oregon in their recruitment that the Ducks are pursuing on the recruiting trail." So I always try to prefer to stay neutral with regular clothing. I don't wear duck gear when I go to games. I don't wear duck gear when I go to practices because I don't want to push anybody towards Oregon. That just happens to be the school that I cover. So I prefer to stay as neutral as I can. I definitely want them to make the best decision for them, whether it's Oregon or another school. So I always prefer to stay neutral. Fun question there. I appreciate it. So those are the ones I got on Twitter. Now I'm going to hop in here on the live chat and get a couple before we get out of here. D2DS 1055. Can you give some insight as to what you've seen regarding Coach Stein's intended scheme? Fast, short passes, or more down the field focus? Yeah, I definitely still need to do some research as far as what we saw last year at UTSA. I tend to put a lot of my focus on recruiting, so I probably haven't learned as much about the scheme as I should or as I'd like to. But I think with Oregon's players, with their personnel, I would definitely think they're going to probably have more of a downfield focus, just given the success that they had last year with Bo Nix. Bo Nix doesn't have the most impressive arm you've ever seen. It's not just like the ball flies out of his hand like it's shot out of a cannon. But that said, he's more than capable of pushing the ball down the field. That was one of my favorite parts of Oregon's offense last year. We finally saw the return of the deep pass. And that's just something that Oregon's been needing for so long. And with this stable of wide receivers that they have, how can you not have more of a down the field focus with guys like Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson, Jirion Dickey, Gary Bryant? There's just so much talent at wide receiver. I think that you're going to see a healthy mix of all three levels: short, intermediate, long. But you definitely want to focus, in my eyes, on that long pass. You use the run to set up the play action. That's kind of football 101. And we expect Oregon to be a really, really good running team. And Stein talked about how the run game is still going to be a priority in his offense in 2023 with the guys that they have with Carlos Loughlin, Bucky Irving, Whittington, Jordan James. So I think we see more of a down the field focus from Stein as far as the passing game is concerned. But definitely excited to see what else we can learn. Up the Scope is a frequent listener and viewer. Thanks for the question. Nice. Thanks for the live, Max. What are your thoughts about our recruiting class and finishing in the 6 to 8 range? Yeah, that's a surprise. Let's see. Six to eight would be tough, but I think if they can flip some of the guys that they're still involved with, and if they can land a couple of guys that they are still in the running for, I think it's possible. Right now, I would probably say I'm leaning more towards eight rather than six, just because of the numbers crunch. But there might be some guys I think down the line here that Oregon finds themselves involved with, where you just have to take them and figure out the numbers later. That's not really a sustainable approach in the long run, but I think it's something that makes sense if you just have those guys that are so good you can't pass them up. You can't pass up on them. But as far as my thoughts on the recruiting class, I love it. I think it's really balanced. I like how you have a couple of quarterbacks in the mix with Van Buren and Moga. I love the defensive line talent that they have. That's definitely a position I'm putting a premium on. With Davian Sims and Tion Gray out of Missouri, a couple of really talented guys. Zadavian, in particular, is someone I'm really excited about just for how athletic he is, and he's pretty young and he's already looking incredibly promising. Like the corners that they have with Dakota Fields and Ify Obadegwu, I'm actually going to see Ify Obadegwu in a couple of weeks when him and Michael Van Buren, St. Francis, come out to play St. John Bosco. So really excited for that. He has some good pieces along the O line with Fox Crater, Jaquan McRoy at the tackle spots, and then Trent Ferguson is a little bit more of a project, but that's a huge dude and he's really athletic from what I've been able to gather. So I think that he might be a little bit of a project, but is an exciting guy nonetheless. Linebackers, love him. Marvin Tootie, Dylan Williams, athletic guys who can run and cover, hard hitters. Safeties, you got Kingston Lopa and Aaron Flowers. Aaron Flowers is one of the best safeties in the country. Love that addition. And then Dejon Riggs at running back. Receiver needs a little bit of work still, I think. You got Jordan Anderson, Jack Retzler, and Dylan Gresham in the fold, but they're still going after some guys. I think you want a little bit more diversity from a skill standpoint at the wide receiver room. You're still looking for that big, physical, imposing wide receiver, but really like that group right now as it stands. Brooks' question, are there any other Texas targets for 2024 or 2025? I think 2024, aside from Justin Williams, there's really not a whole lot that they're still trying to do in Texas right now. I'm pulling up the rankings right now. Colin Simmons is probably locked in with Texas, so I don't think he's a guy they have a really good shot with. Terry Bussey, they were a finalist. He's the number one athlete in the state, but it looks like he might be trending towards Texas A&M, according to the crystal ball. Joseph Jonah Joni is another they were really heavily involved with. He is teammates with Justin Williams and ended up committing to Georgia, earned five-star status at 6'4", 275 pounds. So I don't think they're super involved right now with any of these guys. Selman Bridges, they were kind of giving a look, but he's a corner that committed to Arkansas here this cycle. So those are the main guys in 24. But as for 25, I think you're definitely going to see Oregon continue to be really, really involved with a lot of guys out of the state of Texas in 25. Decorian Moore, he's the number one wide receiver in the state in 2024, but he's already committed to LSU. I think that there's plenty of time, long way to go in that recruitment. He loves Oregon. He visited in the spring, or in the summer, I should say. Might have been both, but in the summer, I know he for sure visited. So Decorian Moore is a wide receiver that Oregon is absolutely going to stay involved with here. Then you also have an offensive lineman, Michael Fasusi, out of Louisville, Texas. He is the top offensive lineman in the state, and I know that I'm pretty sure that Oregon's offered him. He's the top offensive lineman in Texas. Why would you not? But that's a name that comes to mind. They already have Adrian Wilson committed. He's the number 11 player in the country, in the state of Texas, excuse me. Michael Terry is another interesting guy. He's an athlete out of San Antonio, Alamo Heights. He's a guy that I heard about when I went to the Adidas All-American Bowl in January out in the Lone Star State. He has an offer, 6'3", 200 pounds. He plays quarterback for his team. But I think he's definitely a guy that you have to keep an eye on. He's another one that Oregon's offered. DeAndre Ridden from DeSoto. He's a running back, 5'10", 195 pounds. Oregon has some familiarity at DeSoto. after landing a commitment from Stephon Boogie Johnson in the 2022 class, but he ended up going to Oklahoma State, and then is now back in his home state at Houston. So those are some of the Texas guys that you got to watch for. All right, just a couple more, and then we'll have to get out of here. One more question here from Raymond. Taking a sip of coffee for you guys listening on a podcast. Sorry about that. Raymond, do you think Jordan Birch can establish an example of an elite recruit staying hometown hero, but after maturing a little, wants to transfer to Oregon for the NFL preparation? And then in parentheses, Elijah Rushing is who he's referencing here. So I think, yeah. So Jordan Birch is from South Carolina, stayed at South Carolina, and then things didn't quite go that way. And then Raymond is comparing this recruitment to Elijah Rushing, who's from Tucson, is committed to play for Jed Fish and the Arizona Wildcats, hometown hero, literally. Um, I I mean, I guess it can be an example of this if you're looking at Jordan Birch, but um, I think it might just be a little bit too early in terms of what. That's what I was going to say. I just think that I see what you're doing here, but I just don't know if that is a enough of like a pitch. Like, oh hey, like I stayed home, but it wasn't for me, so I had to go somewhere else to take my game to the next level. It makes sense on the surface, but I think more so than looking at it through that angle, I think that George Birch is just a guy that can develop into an elite defensive lineman at Oregon. I mean, if he comes to Oregon, he can still come back to Oregon in 2024. I don't know if enough people are talking about that, but if he does well at Oregon and can have a good year and up his draft stock and maybe even become a first rounder, I think that is what's going to resonate more with a guy like Elijah Rushing and other elite edge players that Oregon's going after than anything else. Can you see the development on the field and can you see the follow through in terms of just identifying, recruiting, developing, and then sending them off to the NFL? I think that's ultimately what you want to see if you're the rushing camp and you're still considering Oregon because they have some of the best coaches for his position. Obviously, the NFL pedigree with Dan Lanning. So I see what you're asking in this question, but I think it's more so just seeing Burge develop and have a good season. I think that carries more weight than the hometown aspect of this recruitment. It's Maddie asks, how do you see a breakdown for the 12-team playoff with likely three power conferences? Oh man, playoff talk is I always get overwhelmed by playoff talk, especially since the season hasn't even started yet. But I think that obviously you're going to have some of those heavy hitters, those blue bloods, the story programs that are always there with Alabama and Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, Florida State, Oregon, USC. I think Oklahoma could be in the mix there. What's that, 9? Um, I don't know if I already said Florida State, but I would put Florida State in there at 10. I think that they're a really, really talented team, and I'm excited to see what they can do this year. I think that they're getting enough hype. That's 2 more. I think I already said Clemson. Um, Notre Dame was in that mix, I think, certainly. So that's 11. And then give me Penn State. I'm gonna throw Penn State in there as well. So I just rattle off 12 teams that I think could be in a playoff. Not going to go too much more in depth there, just because we're kind of running out of time here. But definitely wanted the question. I appreciate you asking. It's Maddie. LFBP Fishing. Love the show, Max. Thank you for the content and all you do. Thank you for tuning in. Happy to do it. 18 people in here and only 1 like. Come on, guys, support our dude. Appreciate you. Got another question here. Maybe we'll make this the last one. Up the Sco asks, who are the kids you think we can flip that are already committed? I think that the best shot that they have probably be would probably be Elijah Rushing. I'm just gonna look up the story because I can't remember Who else I listed here? Okay, so you have Nate Frazier. I think that one's going to be tough. Jeremiah McClellan. I think there's more of a chance than people think with Jeremiah McClellan in Oregon, even though he's committed to Ohio State. Elijah Rushing. I think just the geography, or it was really Oregon or Arizona, so I think that they have a chance to pull that one off. Justin Williams is committed to Georgia. That one's going to be super hard. Um, and then I also listed Isaiah Garcia, who's committed to Utah. He's an offensive tackle, but I'm not feeling as confident in that one as I was when I wrote that story initially, just after talking to some more sources on that one. So, yeah, I think that you have to keep an eye on the Georgia guys, even though it's kind of a long shot. So I'd say Elijah Rushing is definitely the commit that they have the best chance at flipping. Dakota Fields was obviously in this conversation. I tried after he committed to USC just to say, they're still involved. They're still involved. So I thought that was a guy who was going to end up at Oregon the whole time. It was just a matter of when, not if. But that's my answer for that one. So a little bit of a quicker show today, but we got about 40 minutes in there. So hopefully that was enough to hold you guys over. But before I get out of here, do me a quick favor, guys. Like the video and subscribe to the channel, and then hit that notification bell and share the Ducks Dish podcast with your friends, family, and other Duck fans. And make sure you follow me on all social media platforms. I'm at Torres Sports on Twitter and Instagram, at Oregon Football Max Torres here on YouTube if you're watching us. And then you can read all my content over on ducksdigest.com. And go ahead and follow the Ducks Digest Instagram as well. It's just at Ducks Digest. I've been ramping up daily posts over there, trying to get to 1,000 over there, and then just past 2,400 here. So really appreciate you guys for all the support. Everyone have an awesome weekend, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.